Did I just get through telling you that being in bondage brings chaos? And you have chaotic things going on in your life. So now I need to find out whatever it is that I've been in bondage to and get it out, and the chaos will leave. Oh, you blaming me, bro. The root of it also is closely related to Omer, which we're in the middle of the counting of the Omer. As a matter of fact, the counting of the Omer infers that in the process of the counting, we're going up to Jerusalem. And so this entire 50-day period is nothing less than an extended Olah offering. Because when we get to Shavuot, when we get to Jerusalem, you and I are going to be wholly consumed. That's why they saw cloven tongues of fire on the day of Pentecost. Fire burns. Fire purges. Fire warms. Hello? Let's look at the next one. Ishar, Strong's number 3324, written Yod, Zadi, He, Resh, and it's translated as shining oil or glory. But if you look at the Yod, Zadi, that word infers to come out, to burst forth, to complete, to finish. And then if you add the He, Resh, or look at the He, Resh on the end of it, Har, that's the word for mountain, right? Well, the mountain is actually a hill or a mounded place. And if you add the He suffix, hara, say that, hurrah! So you know some Hebrew. That feminine He suffix infers to conceive or become pregnant. Let's look at the Hebron, Strong's number 2275, written with a ket, bait, resh, vav, nun. His name is translated as an association or unity. The root of it is a ket, bait, resh. Pay attention to this. I'll show you where his union was organized at. Chabar infers a union that is specifically associated with idols. But it's also used in the context of Proverbs 21:9 when it talks about dwelling in the house with a brawling woman. We'll move right along. Basically, this word chabar, or chabar, is contrasting the role of the adulterous bride as an antagonistic bride or an antagonistic woman versus one who's faithful. Are y'all seeing the pattern here? See, this is what Yahweh's doing in this Torah portion. He's schooling us. Finally, let's look at the next son, Uziel or Uziel, Strong's number 5816, translated as my strength is El. The root, as a matter of fact, that word is transposed on my notes, but it's right up there. The ayin Zion is the word Az, and it means strength. The Yod means my, and of course the Aleph Lamed on the end is the word for El or Yah, the strong one. And his name is translated as my strength is Yah. But if you change the vowel points, his name is the same as the word Azazel, which was also known as the scapegoat, the goat of removal. Do y'all remember him? On the Day of Atonement, there were two goats. One that would be identified as the offering for Yah, and the other was known as the scapegoat, the one that would take the sins of the camp and remove them to another place. Again, a shadow picture of an Olah offering, an elevated, burnt, consumed offering, the goat that was offered to Yah, and the Azazel that became the jealousy offering, the picture of the adulterous woman who took all of the sins and removed them from the camp. Can y'all see that shadow picture? Well, his name also is closely related to another individual who was charged with handling the ark. You remember that individual? His name was Uzzah. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 6. And this is the incident where King David is having the Ark of the Covenant brought back to Jerusalem. And it's on a cart drawn by oxen. And all of your life you've had some mindsets and paradigms that's been cultivated from this particular Torah portion. This particular verse. And you really didn't understand why poor Uzzah whose heart's intent was right, just to reach and steady the ark. You need to remember that he was charged with carrying that ark. And he knew how to handle it. They'd been trained. Let's read that verse. Are y'all with me? One or two of you is, huh? Are y'all with me? Yes. And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of Yah and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. Now, in the King James English, it tells you that bless his darling heart. The oxen stumbled and it shook the cart, and he just reached out to steady it and was struck graveyard dead. And I really don't know why Yah would do that. But when you look at it in the Hebrew language, it's an entire different message. Nachon, Strong's number 5225, it's translated as prepared. You see the noon, kaf, vav, noon. The root I want you to focus on, Strong's number 3559, the word is kun, kaf, vav, noon, and it means to establish. Listen to this. It means to establish, to set up, to prepare, to stand upright. And when you put a noon in front of it as a prefix, it's the first person, plural, future tense, and it means I will, or rather, it means we will because it's plural. And so basically, this person's name literally means we will prepare to stand upright and establish. Did y'all hear what I just said? His name could also be read, since you have the noon kaf, and it didn't come out right in my notes, the noon kaf. It has noon kaf, it should be noon kaf, which is the root of the name Noah. Remember Noah? And if you add the vav noon suffix to the noon kaf, that suffix means either to diminish, as in diminishing the ministry or efforts of Noah, but it can also infer the personification of the one who's talked about. What is that name telling us? Y'all want me to tell you, since y'all are struggling to dig it out? In their actions, they were like the giants of Noah's day, diminishing the role of Noah as the personification of Messiah. And this is going to be another bitter waters of jealousy example here. Because they were at the place called Goran, the threshing floor. And if you look at the root of Goran, you have Gimel Resh, and that is the word ger, and it indicates a stranger, one who's a sojourner, one who wanders, one who's been exiled. Sounds like the children of Israel who were exiled, right? And then finally we get to the name of the individual. His name is Uzzah, Strong's number 5798. His name is translated as strength, but it's closely related to the Ayin Zion of Azazel, Ez, which is a word for goat, while the aleph infers the head. So basically this name is telling you that his strength was received from the goat who was his head. Let's look a little further. Oxen, since the poor oxen stumbled. The word for oxen here is 1241, bakar, Beit Kuf Resh, and of course it means cattle or oxen, but it's spelled exactly the same as Strong's number 1239, bakar, which means, listen to this, to seek, to investigate, and it's describing the process that the priest would go through to see if someone is unclean. Leviticus 27:33. And now finally the word shook. Strong's number 8058, shamat, which means to throw down, to counsel, to release, to let fall. And if you add the feminine hay to it, you have the word shmita, which is a word for the year of release, the seventh year, which means a remission, the year of release. So what you're finding here is that Yahweh himself shook the ark to see if Uzzah was unclean. He exposed the heart's intent of Uzzah as an adulterous bride who felt like that he would be the one who would cause it to stand upright and be straight and make a covering for himself rather than what would be afforded by the ark. That's why Uzzah was struck down, graveyard dead. Yahweh knew what he was doing. The names of Kohath's children tell us of the story of Israel while they were in Egypt. The exalted people, Amram, would become slaves. Out of chaos, the glory of Yahweh would burst forth upon his bride. separating her from the antagonistic adulterous bride. Messiah, the strength of Yahweh, would become the goat atoning for her, while the scapegoat, or the goat of removal, like the adulterous bride, would be sent into exile, driving them away from the presence of Yah. That's the same scenario that you see in Genesis chapter 3 and in Revelation 13:8 when he says the Lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. Let's look at the remaining sons. It began, as I said, with the first son of Levi, which is a reflection of Yahweh's first son, Adam. In this instance, it's Gershon. This Torah portion starts off with Gershon. You remember Gershon is the one who, if his mother Zipporah had not circumcised him, Moses would have been killed. Remember? They were stopped in the way, and she takes a stone and circumcises him and throws the remaining flesh from that circumcision, and it says throws it at his feet, but the Hebrew language literally infers that what she did, she took the bloody flesh and she threw it and struck him intentionally in the loins. In fact, what she was doing was rehearsing the Passover where the blood was struck on the doorpost before they ever got to Egypt. Gershon had to be circumcised or else Moshe would have been cut off. If you take Moshe and reverse the letters, his name is Hashem, the name. If he had not have been circumcised, the name would have been cut off. Y'all see why it was imperative for that to take place? Now, Gershon is translated as exile. The root is 1644. The word is garash, and that's first seen. You saw that last night in Brittany's teaching, Genesis 3:24, where Yahweh drove out and expelled Adam and Eve. The vav nun on the end of it indicates a personification of the root. In other words, instead of saying to expel, to drive out, to divorce, it's actually declaring him as the personification of being driven out. So he was the expelled one. He became the divorced one. Okay? Let's look at his two sons' name. Gershon's sons, Strong's number 3845, Libni, and of course it's defined as white, or the act of making something white, to wash, to burn, to purge. That's where the word Laban or Laban comes from. It also is a word for bricks. And so when the children of Israel were making bricks in Egypt, they were Laban, Laban. They were making white bricks. See what I'm saying? And then the next son's name is Shimi, Strong's number, say that with me, Shimi. Strong's number 8096, and it's translated as renowned or famous, and it carries the idea of obedience through hearing, Shema. These two names infer that these three names, Gershon, Libni, and Shimi, infer that the expelled or divorced one will be purged and made white by her obedience to what she hears from Yahweh. But there's striking similarity here between the names of these two sons and that of two other sons of Jacob, Levi and Simeon. Can y'all see the connection? Libni and Shimi. The roots are the same. And you have to ask yourself, why would Yahweh use these two similar names? And the basis is, he's taking you back to Genesis 34, verse 1, where Levi and Simeon acted out in rage to what we thought was vindicate their sister Dinah, who had been, quote-unquote, raped by Shechem. But if you will go back and look at what was taking place, it says that Dinah went out to see the daughters of the land. And Hebrew custom forbade her to do that. She was to stay underneath the covering, the authority of her father. And that word go out, yasah, means to go forth from one's home into exile. She broke custom. Dinah played the harlot. It's a picture of the adulterous bride. And all of a sudden you find Levi and Simeon, rather than dealing with her, they act out in rage and they slaughter the entire camp. So because of their rage, they were cut off from being the firstborn. It was Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. First three in order. They were cut off from firstborn inheritance, and it went to the fourth son, Judah. Can y'all see that? Now, let's look to the last of Levi's sons. His name is Merari. Strong's number 4847 is translated as bitter. And if you add up the numerical value of those letters, it totals 450. 450 is the numeric value of another phrase that you should be familiar with. Etzem ma'etzmi. Say that with me. Etzem ma'etzmi. You see that in Genesis chapter 2 when Adam says regarding Eve, she is now bone of my bones. That's the phrase that was used to describe Chava, the mother of all living. And it also is numerically equivalent to another word, Strong's number 1823, demut, which means resemblance, image. We were created in the image, the demut of Yah. And if you break that word, demut, apart, you see the dalet mem, which represents the blood, and you see the mem tav, which is the word met, death. So there's a connection here to the blood being shed for the one who dies. Who was the one who died? Adam and Eve. Blood was shed for the one who dies. By whom? The one who lived. Now let's look at Merari's sons. Machli, 4249, translated as sick. How would you like for your dad to name you that? Hey, sick, come here. Huh? For years I thought I was, had a religious name. Every time I'd get in trouble, my dad would say, Jesus! Guess y'all missed that. The root of that word, machli, is from the root of Strong's number 2470, chala, which means to be weak, sick, diseased in some body part. You think perhaps it's belly and thigh, like the adulterous bride? Y'all getting any of this? It is also related to 2471, challah, which is the bread of the Sabbath, and the word for bride in Hebrew. But there's another root of that word, 3628, kali, which means prison. And if you add the mem prefix to it, machli, it means from or out of. So basically his name can also be translated as one from or out of prison. And finally, the next son, Strong's number 4187, Mushi. I don't know if I want to be named that either. That's defined as yielding, but it's from 4185, mus, which is a verb that means to depart, to remove, to fail to be present, also inferring to feel or to touch. And basically what's being inferred here from these names is that the one who was created in his image, who was that? The bride, Adam and Eve, who was etzem ma'etzmi, bone of my bones. Though she rebelled, my blood was shed for her death penalty. That's what this whole Torah portion is telling us. This entire Torah portion is told in the prophetic nature of these individual names. And Yah's trying to prepare his bride for an encounter at Sinai, where she will be allowed, if you go back and research it, she was brought to Sinai and said, listen, 3 days from now I'll appear on the mountain. You mikvah yourself. And he also told her to change her clothes. What clothes? The whore's garments that she'd had since she come out of Egypt. Change the harlot's garments, and guess what? You'll be betrothed to the great I Am. Hope you've enjoyed this teaching. Thank you for listening. Shalom Aleichem.